at part one, which will center on apology. And the idea behind this is because this is a wide subject matter that we cannot judiciously cover within 2 hours. So for the next couple of minutes, we'll get to zero down on apology. And then probably in the month of April, we'll get to have again a part two or a series two on forgiveness. With that said and done, I'd like to get to my presentation. We have a few slides that I'd like to bring to your attention. I don't know whether my slides are clear. Let me see. Let me see with a thumbs up if you can see my slides.
Yeah, it's clear, Victor.
Thank you. So our agenda for the day will be looking at the significance of an apology, and then we'll get to look at an introduction to an apology. And by introduction to apology, I mean, what does it mean when somebody tells you, I am sorry? Because trust you me, that's a complex statement that in the next few minutes we'll get to have a look at. And then we'll get to look at typologies of apologies. I know we have a wide array of apologies. Right now, as I talk to you, we have diplomatic apologies. If you look at what's happening between the global south and the global north, we are seeing more colonial powers coming out and issuing apologies to countries that they once colonized. We have, of course, celebrity apologies. That is something that I think none of us needs to be introduced to that. And then we have corporation apologies. We are seeing so many companies, coming out and issuing apologies. And the idea behind that, if you ask me, is to attach a human face to predicaments that people are going that can be attributed to a company or a company's product. And then we'll get to look at motivations for an apology. And here we'll get to look into the work of a famous scholar called Lazare, who theorizes that there are two motivations for an apology. We have internal motivations, and of course, we have external motivations. And then we'll get to look at the sincerity of an apology. And I want just to put this out, that we live in a world where people don't mean what they say. So it's important that we get to scrutinize, what qualifies for an apology. Is it a sincere apology? So that's something that at some point we'll need to have a robust conversation on. And then last but not least, we'll get to look at facilitating an apology. And for our work today, we have two referential materials. We have a good book entitled Apology, Forgiveness, and Reconciliation, authored by a prominent scholar, Robinson Peter, from Pepperdine University. And then we have the work of Lazare Aaron, who's authored a book called On Apology. Of course, we have other books on apology, but today our work will be centered on these two materials. With that said and done, I'll move on to my first slide. Of course, I have samples of apologies here that at your own time you'll get to have a look at. I know the organizers, Accords International and the Settlement House ADR Training Institute, will have these slides. So if you need the slides, you can talk to them and they will provide it to you. But we have here samples of apologies. One here is, I would like to express my deepest, and this is the King of Belgium who issued this in relation to the colonial history with Congo. So this is something I want you to look at. And then, of course, here we have a statement by Tim Cook. I suppose we all know him from Apple. This is a statement that he got to issue way back in 2013. Sorry, not 2003. This was in 2013, following public pressure by Chinese consumers that Apple is arrogant. Apple doesn't respond to some of their queries and so on and so to speak. That this underscores the importance of apology in our world today. And then again, we have something from Kevin McAllister. This is the president and CEO of Boeing Commercial Aircraft. I think we are all familiar with the fact that in recent years we've had plane crash. Boeing aircrafts, crashing left, right, and center. And this has drawn a lot of attention from all over the world. So we get to see him issue an apology here. Again, here we have an apology by Terence Cunningham, president of the International Association of Chiefs of Police. And this is in relation to police brutality. And I know that I'm safe enough to say that we are all familiar with police brutality. And I think that something needs to be done in relation to that. And that gets to tell you that ADR has a role to play even within the policing community and law enforcement, so to speak. Again, you have to look at these at your private time. As I said before, Accords International and the Settlement House ADR Training Institute are privy to this material. So if you need the slides, you should contact them and they will avail them to you. Right now, at this point in time, I'd like us to get into the significance of an apology. Maybe a question would be, who has facilitated an apology before here? I know some of us have facilitated apologies in our midst, but I'd like us to take a look at the significance of an apology. What's the place of an apology in our society today? And we have a number of reasons for that. From the victim's perspective, an apology plays a critical role in stimulating their healing process. This is something that I think we can all relate to. When somebody has done you a wrong, at times the wounds are psychological. The scars cannot be seen, but they can be felt. And so when somebody apologizes to you, it really quickens the process of healing. And then maybe I should say that there is a sense of dignity to that as well. And then number two, from an offender's perspective, when you get to extend an apology to somebody, you get to free yourself of guilt. And I think we can all relate to this because at some point in life, we have offended somebody. And at times, with an offense, you are caught up in guilt. And so what an apology does is that it gives you an opportunity to get to clear your mind. And then number three, an apology is critical in insulating against retaliation or recurrence of an injurious behavior. I think we live in societies where once somebody has wronged you, you want to wrong them in kind. And so with an apology, when you extend an apology, what you do is you minimize the chances of that person doing you a wrong as well. And then number four, an apology is significant in restoring broken relationship and human dignity. That's something that I think we can all relate to. And then number five, it's a gesture of generosity. I know we are all too familiar with the concept of generosity, particularly in mediation. Generosity is very important in mediation insofar as concessions. We all know that the lifeline of mediation is concessions. It's a give and take. So at times when somebody extends a gesture of generosity, what it does is that it creates an atmosphere for the other party to make a concession as well. And then number last, but not least in any way, an apology attaches a human face to human interactions. I think we live in a world where human interactions have been relegated to lower status. But with an apology, when a corporation makes an apology, what it does is that it gives a human face to somebody's predicament. And that's something that I think we all need to talk about. At times, litigation doesn't get the job done. Because with litigation, it's about your rights and my rights. And at times we can forget that we are dealing with human beings. So it's important that we get to look into this, that an apology adds a human face to people's predicament. With that, I'd like to get into what's an apology in actual sense. And I want us to have this at the back of our mind that when somebody says to you, I'm sorry, it's a pretty complex statement. It's not a straightforward statement as we would have it. And so with that in mind, I'd like us to see it from this perspective, that we have two key ingredients or fundamental ingredients that make up for what an apology is. Number one, the first variable in an apology is that it communicates an acknowledgement that a behavior has caused harm to somebody. So the first variable here is a harm. An apology has to communicate or acknowledge that a harm has been done to a person or to a society. And then number two, an apology must unequivocally communicate that you have caused a harm and this harm is wrong. From a legal language, that would be culpability. An apology has to show culpability. And in a nutshell, an apology here means telling the truth and taking the responsibility. That's what an apology is. When I tell Upasana that I'm so sorry, what I'm telling her in a nutshell is that I'm telling you the truth. And number two, I'm taking responsibility for what I have done to offend you. And in our diagram here, sorry, it should be harm plus culpability should amount to, this should amount to an apology, not culpability. I hope we are all following. So an apology here has two components. The first component of what an apology communicates is a harm, that somebody's behavior or omission or commission has occasioned a harm to somebody or to a society or to even an environment. I mean, we live in a world where environmental degradation is a thing. So there are apologies that can be extended to people within a given environment. And then number three, or rather I should proceed to the next slide, sorry. So I have here a diagram of an apology diagram. I don't know if we can all see the diagram. So what I'm gonna do is, just a minute, as I get rid of my diagrams, I'm going to draw an L-shaped diagram to demonstrate to you the practicality of an apology, right? So I'm going to pick my pen and draw an L-shaped diagram. And on this L-shaped diagram, we have a vertical line and we have a horizontal line. On the vertical line, we'll have the behavior that has caused, behavior causing harm. That's on our vertical line. And then on our horizontal line, we'll have a statement, wrongful behavior. Wrongful behavior. Remember, an apology has two variables. The first variable is that an apology communicates that somebody's behavior has caused her harm. And then number two, an apology communicates that somebody is willing to take responsibility. And responsibility here could be moral responsibility, or it could be ethical responsibility from a workplace standpoint. So that's our structure for what an apology is. Remember, on the vertical line, we have behavior causing harm. And then on the horizontal line, we have a wrongful behavior. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'll have my pen and then I'll proceed to the next diagram. So we have different kinds of apologies. Earlier on, I mentioned to you that we have a diplomatic apology, and this is renowned in the diplomatic corps. We have celebrity apology, and this is in the celebrity world. I remember sometimes last year, we have a famous actor by the name John Cena who had to issue an apology to China. So that would fall or qualify as a celebrity apology. And then, of course, we have a corporation apology. At some point, I talked about a Boeing company issuing an apology to families. to families that had lost their loved ones in aircrafts that have been manufactured by the Boeing company. But today here we'll get to look at about 4 kinds of apologies from an ADR standpoint. And our first apology is a remorseful apology. And just as the name suggests, what it does is that it communicates remorse, that I'm so sorry for what I have done. And I am taking full responsibility for what I have done to a person or what somebody has done to another person. So in a nutshell, this is what it entails. It entails the apologizer, condemning their actions. And then number 2, they get to communicate the fact that it was a wrongful act, morally and ethically. And then number 3, a remorseful apology communicates an explanation. You must give an explanation as to why you acted in that particular manner. And then number 3, there has to be some kind of a compensation or reparation if you are looking at it from a colonization perspective. And then equally important, this kind of an apology is motivated by a sense of self-guilty. Your conscience is eating up on you. Your conscience is wrestling you up. And the only way out of that is to extend an apology to a party that you have harmed them. And I think it's important for me to equally say this. There are times in mediation, it's not about the money. It's not a numbers game as we all think it is. Sometimes, somebody just wants an apology. And I think at this point in time, it's important for me to express this, that we can have apologies in mediation at 2 different levels. There are mediation scenarios where an apology is a condition precedent. What do I mean by this? An apology is a stepping stone to the mediation taking place. There are scenarios where parties will say that unless this party apologizes, I'm not having this mediation conversation. So that's one level. That's one level where we have apologies in mediation. The other level where we get to have apologies in mediation is when you are writing the final resolution or memorandum of understanding, if you would like. So these are 2 important platforms where we get to have apologies play a fundamental role in mediation proceedings. So I'd like us to take a look at a second category or cadre of apology, and this is what I call a regret apology. And here, the apologizer is stating the fact that, yes, my behavior, my omission, my commission has occasioned a harm to somebody. But they are saying that, I had to do this. If I were to demonstrate a regret apology to Francis Ojok, my good friend, I would tell him this: I'm so sorry that I had to do this, but I had no other option. You realize that this information, number 1, communicates that, yes, I have done a wrongful act. I have done harm to you, but nonetheless, I justify why I did harm to you. I don't know whether we can see the differences between a remorse apology and a regret apology. When we contrast the 2, you realize that in our L-shaped structure, the remorse apology seems to meet both ingredients, but a regret apology just meets one of the ingredients. And that's why from the outset, I told you that the statement, I'm sorry, or I'm apologizing, at a facial stance, it looks very straightforward. But trust you me, there's more than meets the eye. Somebody could be telling you, I'm sorry. However, they are saying that my actions were justified. So we need to have a look for that as well. We are all mediators, and I think a communication is important. A party could tell you that, tell the other party that I'm sorry, but you need to dig deep. What kind of an apology are they extending to the other party? And then the other thing that I'd like us to know about a regret apology is that the prime motivation here is empathy and compassion. If I tell my good friend Francis Ojok that I'm so sorry that this happened, but trust you me, I had no other option. My motivation here is empathy and compassion. I'm trying to tell him that I'm so sorry that I put you in a certain position, in a certain a precarious position. But nonetheless, I had no other option. So it's important that we get to have this at the back of our mind. And then the interesting thing about the regret apology is that it denies moral and ethical culpability. And at this point in time, I'd like to draw your attention to an interview that was conducted where a true man was asked, do you feel or do you think that the use of nuclear bombs in Japan was inappropriate? And this is how he responded. He told them that he is so sorry that so many lives were lost, but nonetheless, they had no other option. So in a nutshell, what he is trying to say is that I'm sorry, but I can justify my actions or my behavior. So it's important that we get to look out for some of these nuances that we have between all these forms of apologies. And then we have an empathy apology. And here the apologizer, is communicating empathy. And empathy here is the ability or power to put yourself into somebody's shoes. And the interesting thing about an empathy apology is the apologizer is a third party in the sense that they have not been involved in any action that has resulted to a harm or a wrongful behavior. So here, in so many ways, what I'm trying to say is this: if Mr. Nanchang and I are walking together and a car comes and splashes on him, and I tell him I'm sorry, what I'm trying to tell him is that I sympathize with your position. So this is something again that we need to look out for. When you see somebody go through a hard time in life, and you tell them I'm sorry, I think the most famous would be if somebody tells you that they have lost their loved ones, and you tell them I'm so sorry for your loss. It doesn't mean that you are involved in that person losing their loved one. What you're trying to tell them is that you sympathize with them. And the overarching objective of an empathetic apology is that you are telling somebody that you're having feelings or emotions of compassion towards what they are feeling. And this is something that is very important. And then I'd like us to have a look at our fourth apology,
Victor,
which is...
Victor, can we remove the drawing on the slides? Or if you want, I can do that.
It's all right. I can do it. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me get rid of it.
Yeah. And Victor, can we also talk? I was about to ask you about the harmless error apology. I think that is what happened in the beginning of this session today. It was a harmless error apology.
That's right. That's right.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So the thing about a harmless error apology here is you are telling somebody that you didn't cause them a harm, but you're sorry for your behavior. I want to look at it from this standpoint. If I'm an Uber driver and Upasana gets into my car, or for instance, Leila, let me use a different participant. I'm an Uber driver, and Leila is, coming from the airport, and she needs to get to a point called X, and she gets into my Uber car, and I get to drive at a fast speed, right? I've not caused her any harm, but nonetheless, I am communicating an apology for my behavior, right? So you are taking moral culpability in the sense that I shouldn't be driving at this speed, but I'm so sorry that I drove at this speed. So that's what a harmless error apology does. And then the other would be the last but not least typology of an apology is the social harmony apology. This is where, because of pressure, because of societal pressure, you extend an apology. And a good example here would be what Tim Cook did in 2013 with Apple. They had to issue an apology to their consumers in China that, look, we are so sorry that it appears that we are very arrogant and we do not attend to queries and feedback from our consumers. So it's important that we have this at the back of our mind. And at this point in time, maybe I like us to look at the apology content. I don't know if you guys can see it, but anyway, what I'm gonna do is I'm going to demonstrate it using my L structure again. So here is my L structure, right? Remember on the vertical line, we said that you have harm or behavior that has caused a harm. So here we have harm. And then on the horizontal line, we have, we have culpability. Remember, conventionally, an apology should communicate a behavior that has occasioned a harm. And number two, it needs to communicate culpability, taking responsibility, so to speak. And then, so based on what we have just gone through, we've just looked at the different typologies of apologies. So if we were to place a remorseful apology, it would be here. This is where we would have remorseful apology. Please, somebody tell me that you are following.
Very well, sir.
Okay, thank you. So we would have a remorseful apology here because, number one, a remorseful apology communicates a behavior that has occasioned a harm. And number two, it communicates culpability, taking responsibility. So this is where we would have a remorseful apology. It meets at it meets, where you have the two lines meeting. And then we would have regretful apology here. Remember, regretful apology communicates that, yes, you have caused harm to somebody, but then you are saying that you can justify it. So it's here because, number one, it communicates harm, and number two, it doesn't communicate culpability, or rather, you think that your action was appropriate. I want us to think of a scenario where you have a police officer who has shot somebody dead. And when they are issuing their apology, public apology to the community, they tell the community that, look, I had no other option. He was pointing his gun at me. So the only thing that I needed to do at that point in time was to pull the trigger against him. So it's either I was to be killed or I killed him. So in this rationale, what the police officer is saying is that he is sorry that a life has been lost, but nonetheless, he's saying that he is not taking any form of culpability. He is not to take any responsibility. So this is why we are having the regret apology here. It communicates harm, but it negates the culpability component. And then we'll get to look at the other form of apology, which is an empathetic apology. An empathetic apology would be, it should actually be outside of this diagram. Because remember, the empathy apology is being extended by a third party. I wasn't a party in the action that is leading to a harm and a wrongful act. But nonetheless, I resonate with what you're going through. And I remember we said that if somebody tells you that they have lost a loved one, the first thing that comes to your mind is telling them, oh, I'm so sorry that you lost your loved one. So this is where we would have the emotional, this is where we would have the empathetic apology. I don't know if we're following this.
Yes,
Can I get a thumbs up?
Yeah. Yes, Victor, it's quite clear. Nice.
Thank you. Are we all together? Are we learning?
Yeah, we're learning.
Thank you. So this is where we would have the empathetic apology. And then we have the other apology, which is the social harmony apology. And here you're just issuing an apology because of a public outcry. So it's coerced apology. You don't really necessarily mean to apologize, but because of saving your self-image, you come out and issue an apology. And I think politicians are culprits for that. They would say statements that they do not believe in. So that's what we call the social harmony apology. It's issued just to make bridges amend. And with that, I'd like us to proceed to, here we had a quadrum. I had a diagram. I don't know whether you guys can see it. A quadrum is a circle, and then you divide it into 4 pieces. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw again a diagram that is more decent. And please forgive my
doodling.
Yes.
I can see you are enjoying. I am enjoying looking at what you're drawing here. I think this is the best way to teach.
Thank you. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw a quadrum. A quadrum is a circle. Sorry. So I'm going to draw a circle. Don't mind about my circle. So I'm going to subdivide it into 4. Yes. And then onto our left here, we'll have our remorse apology. Then we'll have our regret apology. We'll have our empathy apology. And the idea behind an empathy apology is just projecting compassion, that you understand, you imagine what somebody is going through. And then here we'll have our social harmony apology. Don't mind about my diagram. I'm just trying to illustrate this. So these are the various forms of apologies that we have in mediation. And I think it's important that we get to have an understanding and comprehension of this, because parties will communicate to you different things. But it's important for you to look into the nuances that these apologies carry. The other thing that I'd like to maybe point would be, sorry, as I move to my the motivations for apology. So according to Aaron Lazare, who is widely considered as a scholar on issues to do with apology, he states that there are 2 fundamental reasons or motivations for apology, or impetus, if you like. So the first is we have internal reasons. So I'm going to use my pen again. So we have internal reasons and external reasons. Internal, a good example of an internal reason would be, your conscience is wrestling you. You've done something to your spouse. I know some of us here are married. You've done something not so good to your spouse. You yelled at them, and your conscience begin to wrestle you that, look, Upasana, what you said to him was not kind. Or look, Mr. Nanchan, it's not good to yell at your significant other. So here the rationale, the motivation is your conscience wrestling you, right? And then the other reason why we would have an internal, the second reason why we get to have internal reasons would be, you are feeling compassionate. It's your compassion that is driving you to try as much as possible to relate to the other party. So that's very important. And then number 2, he hypothesizes that we have external forces or factors that compel us to issue an apology. And a good example here would be, you don't want the other party to retaliate, right? So what you do is you issue an apology just to cushion yourself against the other party doing something bad to you. Another good scenario where we can have an external a force is where public pressure, there's too much public pressure for you to come out and issue an apology. And I think politicians are notorious for this. So these are the 2 reasons why people primarily extend apologies to other parties. So what I'm gonna do is I'm going to get rid of my scribbling. I don't have the best scribbling skills, but anyway, it has to suffice. And then we have the quality of an apology. And I think it's important that we get to look at, certain thresholds. And according to Aaron Lazare again, there are 3 thresholds that you can use to test the veracity and authenticity of an apology. Number 1, I'm going to write again. Again, remember, you will get the slides from Accords International and the Settlement House of ADR training. So number 1, it has to communicate the first 2 variables that we said. It has to communicate a harm, right? And then number 2, it has to communicate culpability. I am saying the truth, and I am willing to take responsibility for my behavior. So you realize that the most authentic apology is a remorseful apology, because this person is being sincere. And then number 2, if we want to test the authenticity or veracity, if you like, of an apology, we'll get to look at, sorry, let me get my pen. It has to offer an explanation. The person must come out clear and state as to why they acted in a certain behavior. I think we have culture, context, personality with other party are important factors. Very important. Thank you for that, Upasana.
Thank you. Thank you, Victor.
You've just stated a fundamental thing in apology, because we live in different societies, and different societies have different cultures. For instance, I'm told that in the Asian culture, which is a collectivist culture, an apology plays a significant role for the community. And I suppose that's the same assumption within the African society. It's a critical pillar of our society. So that's a very important point that you bring on board. And then number 3, according again to Aaron Lazare, he states that an apology must have some kind of a reparation or compensation. And I'm just going to use a scenario here. I'll use an automobile manufacturer, and I don't have any ill against a Tata, but we'll just use it here. We'll just use it here as a guinea pig to extrapolate on what we are trying to say. So Tata has manufactured a car that has been distributed to Africa, and we have somebody from Africa who's bought a Tata vehicle. And again, I know, Upasana, you'll understand what I'm trying to say. I have nothing against Tata. That's for a fact.
So, I don't mind if you do have something against Tata. He's not giving me anything.
Okay. So, yeah. So somebody from Nigeria has bought a Tata car. And once they bought the car, as they were, cruising around with the car develops, a structural malfunction. And this person gets into an accident, and they lose their hands, their limbs, and so on and so to speak. I think it would be unfair for Tata to come out and say that we are so sorry that we manufactured a car that is faulty, and not compensate this person in any kind of form or shape. So that's what I'm trying to say here, that the third threshold for what you use to examine the authenticity of an apology is that there has to be some form of a reparation. And I think number 4, the 4th rationale is, the offender needs to communicate or guarantee the other party that this is not going to happen again. I'm so sorry that I did this to you, Francis Ojok, and I can guarantee you that this will not happen again. I am so sorry. So these are the various rationales that you can use to, put an apology into context. And with that, maybe I'd like us to, just a minute, let me get rid of my clumsy.
Victor, if you allow me, I want to add somewhere there. I had it prepared for later, but I might, because I'm leaving it, I might be leaving in like 1 hour. I might not get the chance. So when you say quality of apology, I just want to highlight here that it's again, how am I apologizing? Because, for example, there are, just listen to these three sentences very carefully. When I'm saying, I am sorry you are upset, I am sorry that bothered you, I am sorry you don't understand what I'm saying. In all these three statements, what did I do? After the word sorry, I said you. Instead of saying, I am sorry that I upset you, I am sorry that I'm not able to explain you, I am sorry that I am bothering you. Here, I associated the word I with the word sorry. So that is how I am not, it's not a vague statement made by me, wherein I am channelizing the focus on the person who is feeling bad or to whom I am apologizing. So that this is something that I wanted to highlight here, that as mediators, we cannot definitely tell parties how to apologize, but we can definitely channelize them towards a direction in which they can make an apology which is actually felt by the other person. And definitely quality of apology matters a lot. I agree with Victor here, that it has, your regret should be quite visible. So while Victor is gonna deal with the factors and um, uh, relevant parts of apology, I would like all of you to think about two apologies that you have done in the past 2 weeks. Number one, apologies that you have made to someone, or apologies that someone has made to you. And then sort of fix what Victor is trying to tell you, and try to look at the different parts of apology and different facets of apology, and fix on those apologies that you have either made or received in the past 2 weeks, in your daily personal life or your professional life, in your business space, or if you are an advocate or a mediator in your career. So I'm sorry to interrupt you, Victor, there, but I just wanted to
It's
add.
all right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's all right. Sincerity plays a good role. Again, I'm going to cast politicians in bad light. Politicians are known for issuing statements
Thank
such
you very
as,
much for.
Thank you.
oh,
Yeah.
Yes, and I believe that Victor will soon round up. You will also have a chance to do your own contribution before you leave. I understand you have another meeting. So,
Yeah.
yes, thank you.
Thank you, Nanchan. Victor, you were saying something about politicians.
oh yes, I don't have anything against politician. Again, let me put it out there. Politicians, are famous for putting out statements like, "I'm so sorry that you misunderstood what I was saying." You see, that doesn't come out as an apology, because they are pointing the finger at you. "I'm so sorry, Upasana, that you didn't get to understand what I'm saying." That's not an apology. So we need to look out for some of these nuances as well. Thank you for rekindling my memory on that. And then facilitating an apology. There are quite a number of factors that we need to put into consideration. I'll come to this apology again. Your style and philosophy as a mediator. Of course, some of us who are privileged to have gone through the riskins agreed. We know that we have quite a number of styles. We have the facilitative style, we have the transformative style, and then we have the third style, which is purely facilitative. We have the party giving the party saying that I'm just here to control the process and so on, and so to speak. So style plays a critical role here, and your style most probably could be as a result of your philosophy. We have different philosophies. There are people who view conflict as an opportunity for the parties to grow, to grow rather. And with that perspective, you would be a transformative, you'll be a transformative mediator without getting into the subtleties. Again, number two, the level of enthusiasm for an apology between the parties. That's very important. I think one of the critical skills that as mediators we need to inculcate is the ability to read the temperatures in the room. What are indications that the parties are signaling to you? And then I'm about to round up as I'm being told. And then the mediator's degree of control of the process. Remember, in mediation, the parties control the outcome, but you as a mediator, you control the process. And then the degree of vulnerability between the parties and the mediator. It's important that we get to see the gap between us and the parties. And then, of course, we need to look at the victim's demand for an apology. Is an apology a preconditional statement? And then the party's willingness to apologize, and then type and content of the apologies. This is very important. I'll just jump to facilitating an apology as a mediator. This should be our last slide. One angle that we can use to facilitate an apology would be where parties are trying to identify their interests. This gives you an ample opportunity as a mediator to sneak in the concept of an apology.
Mr. Victor.
And then, yes.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, sir.
Hello, Mr. Victor.
Hello, I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. I hear you. And then number two, you can facilitate an apology within the concept of the mediator's proposal. And here you're recommending a proposal to the parties. And this should come when there is a dead end. You don't just issue out a mediator's proposal. And if important, you should seek the approval and consent of the parties before you can issue a mediator's proposal. A good example would be if one of the parties in a room is Francis. This is what I'll tell Francis. Francis, are you okay with me coming out with an idea for both of you? And of course, Francis will tell me yes. So in that scenario, I have a go-ahead to go and issue a proposal or a recommendation. And then the other thing that I want us to have at the back of our mind is that the mediator is an agent of reality. When all is said and done, you have a role to let the parties know that these are the facts of the case. Because at times, there's an assumption that, mediation seeks to shelve the facts. No, that's not what we are doing. In mediation, as we try as much as possible to be agents of realities to the party. So we bring the parties, we bring them back to their elements and tell them that, this is what we are looking and we should face it. And then another way that we can have you as a mediator facilitate an apology is when you are formulating or giving an expression. I think it's fundamental that I get to say this, that in mediation, mediators at times play a fundamental role in helping the parties articulate their feelings, their thoughts, and their ideas. So here we have, again, an ample opportunity to sneak in an apology. And sorry for the use of sneaking in. And then we can use questions as well to facilitate a party extending an apology. I think we are all fully aware to the power that questioning plays in an apology. And as I said earlier on, you'll get to have the slides and you will get to look at some of the questions that you can use to prompt an apology from a party. Would you have handled this matter the same way again? What you're trying to do is stimulate thoughts into the party. The other would be the other person is hurting. Does that matter to you? Again, here you are playing around with questions. And with that said and done, I return the forum to Mr. Nanchang. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Victor, for this wonderful session. That's wonderful. Without much waste of time, we will want to go straight into the panel's discussion. And today, we are privileged to have our panels of discussants. The first person we have here is Upasana Singh. I hope I do not murder your name. Okay. Yes. So quickly, Upasana Singh is a conflict resolution professional, an IMI certified mediator from the London School of Mediation, UK, and a High Court of Delhi, a practicing advocate, the Supreme Court of India, and a learning enhancement specialist. She advises businesses, individuals, and educational institutes on methods of conflict resolution. She is the founder and CEO of Accords International, based in India. She holds the position of reviewer with the Indian Law Institute, law review, and executive editor of DME Journal of Law. She is also a fellow of Global Policy Insights, a centralist policy institute based in India, the USA, and the UK. She is a mediator of Insights Collaboration International, Canada. Please, can you join me to welcome one of the panelists? Please join me. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. We have also one of the panelists, Mr. Joseph George. Mr. Joseph George is an intelligent and astute businessman with the innovative and motivational mindset. His passion for helping people shows in his body of work. He is an independent, full-time Supreme Court appointed mediator and arbitrator based in the USA. As an arbitrator, his role is to ensure the parties get a fair and effectively managed proceedings. His talent as a mediator helps to guide the parties to a mutually satisfactory dispute settlement. The combination of his past industry experience in contract negotiations and his skills in crisis management makes him an ideal mediator or arbitrator for matters involving construction or employment, as well as complex business disputes. Both roles are crucial components in his position as the founding partner with the Judge and Judge ADR Group. As an alternative dispute resolution boutique firm, their primary focus is on the beauty and cosmetic industry. This includes hair salon, day spas, barbershops, and suits rentals through arbitration, mediation, and negotiation. There are a lot more to know about him, but can we welcome Mr. Joseph George as one of the panelists?
Thank you guys very much for having me.
Yes, and our last panelist here is Mr. Francis Ojok. He is a trained lawyer with extensive experience in international arbitration and dispute resolution, negotiation, and mediation particularly. He is a certified mediator and an International Mediator Institute qualified international mediator. He mediates with GOCO Mediation, Settlement House ADR Training Institute, SHATI, and a dispute consultant with Dynamic Team Solution, USA. Francis Ojok holds a Master's of Law LLM from the Strauss Institute for Dispute Resolution, Caruso School of Law, Pepperdine University. He has a Master's of Art in Conflict Resolution and Coexistence from Brandeis University, Heller School of Social Policy and Management. He has a postgraduate diploma in legal practice from the Law Development Center and a Bachelor of Laws LLB degree from Kampala International University, Uganda. Please, can you join me? Welcome Mr. Francis Ojok to this panel. Now, quickly, let's have your thoughts concerning the topic we just discussed. Let's start with Upasana. I know she spoke. She will lay more emphasis on what an aspect she wants to talk to. Then we'll go to Mr. George, And then afterward, we go to Francis, please. Opasana, you have the floor.
Yeah, thank you, Nanchang, for that wonderful introduction, and thank you, Victor, for that very insightful PowerPoint presentation. Whenever I listen to you, I always end up learning something new, and the passion with which you present and teach the cohort, it is always contagious. So thank you for being so kind and so I don't know, warm as a person. So, and I welcome other co-discussants here. Thank you for sharing this space, and everybody who has joined us from different parts of the world. So, and thank you, Settlement House, for inviting me. So we received the questions in the evening regarding few questions which the participants have already shared with us. So I'm going to pick few questions from there and deal with them. Because apology is something that Victor is dealing with, and I just added my flavor to that, what I wanted to share about the quality of apology and how should it be made. But there are 2-3 questions which Nanchang shared in the morning, which should be addressed in this meeting. So number one, how to convince oneself to forgive someone and forget. So now this question, I think this is by one of the participants and even others, Joseph and Francis, if you want to go ahead with the same question, then please feel free to intervene there and just share with us what you think about this. But so this is a question, see, this is an internal motivation that this question is talking about. When Victor was telling us about different types of apologies, I could sense different motivations there. Internal motivation, external motivation. When there is an internal motivation, then we go for remorse apology, regret apology, social harmony apology, harmless error apology. When we are realizing that our act was wrong, either our act was wrong or an injury has been made to the other person. So from inside, we go ahead and apologize. So this question addresses the internal realization and internal motivation to apologize. And yes, the question is, how should we convince? The very straightforward answer to this question is that we have to understand in terms of that x-axis and y-axis that Victor drew in the beginning of the PPT, that did I injure somebody with an act which was wrong? If we find a yes to both these axes, both these questions, then it's a definite yes. Yes, I should apologize and then I should move forward. So it is a self-reflection that we have to do, whether my act injured somebody or not, or whether my act was wrong. For example, if I am a police officer and if I have to put somebody behind the bar, or if I am a construction worker and I am repairing the road, then my act might not be wrong. But if I am blocking the way and there are people who are not able to cross, they're definitely getting that injury. And I'm feeling bad about it. I'll make a regret apology. I'll say, I'm sorry, I cannot help it, I'm sorry. But if I'm texting and I'm driving and then I met with an accident, I hit somebody, I know my act is wrong and I know that I'm injured somebody with that act. I'll step outside the car and I'll apologize. And I might as well say that I am sorry, because of me, you experienced that injury, and please let me know how I can repair it. We can call the insurance and we might exchange numbers there. In Delhi, in India, however, the scene is different. If somebody hits somebody, then you just get out and you start counting your forefathers. And I think you like reach 4-5 generations. You don't know who my father is. You don't know who I know. So that's a different kind of interaction that happens in India. And Arup ji is here in the meeting. He might agree with that. So that's altogether a different discussion that happens in Indian cases. But yes, that is the apology. Now, the second question which I wanted to deal with is, do the parties need to apologize to each other and even go on to forgiveness? Now, this question is from the side of the mediator. Initially, the question is, should I apologize? Now, the question is, do the parties need to apologize and go ahead? Now, as I can see, there are many mediators in the meeting right now. And there are different types of mediation styles: evaluative, facilitative, transformative. But when we are doing a facilitative mediation, what we have to do is we have to facilitate an apology. We have to we have to create the circumstances where the parties feel that yes, apology is possible. Now, how can you make that happen? You cannot ask a party to apologize. You cannot take the party to the private session or the caucus and ask the party to apologize. See, you are wrong. So that is something that as mediators, we cannot do. But how can we do, how can we create that space for the parties where they can apologize? By extracting as much information as possible from the parties, by taking them away from position to interest. For example, if there is an employer and an employee dispute in front of you, it's a workplace mediation that you are doing, and there is an employer and an employee dispute, and the employer made a sarcastic comment which was borderline misogynist and almost amounting to sexual harassment. Here comes different elements of apology, which Victor was talking about. Context is important, circumstances are important, culture is important. Every organization has a different culture. If I go to a Google office, there's a different culture. If I go to some other office, there's a different culture. Every individual brings a different culture with him or her. So here, as a mediator, if we know that there is a dispute, if we know that both the parties, they are hell-bent on their positions that they are right, we have to extract as much information as possible. Here we can ask the person who has offended the female worker, do you realize what are the consequences of your act? We can do a little bit of reality testing in the private session. That are you ready for the consequences if for example, X takes the matter to the court? So now here you can also create that external motivation of punishment or sanction. Let's see, are you ready for that to go to court? Are you seriously ready for that? So some sort of motivation as mediators you can give, but definitely you cannot suggest that if this is the right time for an apology. Now, another question which I wanted to discuss with the participants here is that, and it is not related to apology, but it is there mentioned in the questions shared with us was, number one, what is the result of a mediation outcome? So I think that is different in different jurisdictions. In India, right now we are standing at a place where we are looking at a mediation act, which will make a mediation settlement binding. Right now, no. We if there is a settlement, as mediators, I'm a private mediator here in Delhi, we tell the parties to get into a contract, and that contract is binding. But I don't know what happens in Nigeria. Maybe Nanchan can discuss about that. So that is the question that I wanted to deal with. For a civil international mediation, you can look at the Singapore Convention if your country is a signatory and they have ratified the convention. And mediation in criminal matters is very limited in India. I don't know what is the case in Nigeria. The final question is how to prepare oneself for ADR competitions. So this, I will not take up a lot of time here to discuss about this, but ACORDS International facilitate teams, and I personally coach a lot of national and international teams for mediation competitions. So if you want to go ahead and connect with me, if any of you or any of your students are preparing for mediation competitions, ICC and different other mediation competitions, then we can definitely get in touch, and we can, in fact, I'm coaching a team tomorrow morning. So we can definitely connect there, and it's easy. You just feel that it's a real-time situation that you are dealing with. And yes, there are other things to be dealt with, but I'm not going to take a lot of time there on this question. So that was me, Nanchan. Thank you for letting me have this space and share what I felt is right to be shared with the participants. Now over to you, Francis Joseph. Thank you.
Okay, thank you guys. Thank you, Victor, for that great slide presentation. That was awesome. I actually learned a lot of different things in there. Thank you, Settlement House, for actually having me and inviting me to be part of this great discussion here. It's always good when we could meet other ADR professionals internationally, especially United States. We have different ways of handling disputes here in the United States. And a lot of people have reached out to me from different international, from Japan, China, different places that they are actually have ADR disputes to learn what we do in here in the United States, because sometimes the template off of what we do in here in the US, because we've been structured a little bit more than other people in handling these type of disputes. So I'd like to thank you guys again for inviting me to be part of this great discussion. I'd like to also thank my panelists, my fellow panelists, actually attending also. I think we'd be a great team. We could do a lot when we all work together in discussions like this, learning from each other. It only benefits everybody in this type of discussion and type of forum. So on that note, I'm gonna do mine a little bit different just because of time for everybody. So I'll start off with how the apology works in me, but I'm gonna do it more of experience side of things versus a discussion side. So I do a lot of employment and construction disputes. So I had a case where it's an employment dispute where the participant is, the claimant is actually filing a case with the EEOC. And I don't know if you guys know what EEOC. So EEOC here in the United States is the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. That's the governing body that governs any case that's found that a company have violated any type of discrimination law. That's the governing federal body that, investigates those disputes and see if the allegations proven to be fruitful. And then they'll go ahead and file what they call a suit against the company if they do find something to be pertinent against the company. So with this particular case that I was working on, the employee was upset because, many employees promise a lot of wage increase when you start to work for the companies, but he felt like the job was toxic. The work culture was not suited as he anticipated it to be during his time at the company. His manager, he felt wronged him several times, passed new employees over him at the particular time, and gave everybody more of a, he felt racially discriminated against. So, but what managers do and what the company culture is two separate type of things. But anyway, he filed a case. They sit down with me and they had the discussion. And during the discussion, he was explaining how disgusted he was with the company, but he said it was more of his manager, not the company. He was mad. He was pretty much mad at the manager that he was working with him. Now, this is where the apology come in, that way I can move on to the other question. During the discussion, how he was very upset and he was steaming and he was, back and forth with me on how he want the money from the company. He's gonna sue them, his attorneys there, everything. So they all pretty much is highlighted and esteemed. And during that part, the representative for the company and the attorney for the company, didn't want to pay. So what happens was they asked the owner of the company came in and he asked me, can he say something to the claimant? So I asked the claimant if he mind that the owner of the company want to say something to him. And he said yes. So he approved me to bring him. So I brought them back from caucus, and I brought them back into the same room. And the owner turned to him and said, Mr. So-and-so, I'm so sorry that this has happened to you. This is not part of my company culture when I started this business. This is not what I expected to have in my firm. From the deepest of my heart, I truly apologize that this happened to you. I know my attorney is here and my representative is here, but you tell me what you would like me to do, and I will take care of it, because at the end of the day, I am held accountable because everybody is trained under me and I own the company. So I'm accountable, and I am sorry that this has happened. And without notice to me, the claimant stopped and he paused, and I was like, hey, you okay? And he just started crying. And he said to the owner, I don't want nothing. You don't give me what I wanted. That apology was heartfelt, and to bring me to tears like this, I know that you mean it, because it brought me to tears. And for you to take time out of your busy schedule, because they have over, I think it's 15,000 employees, and he has other businesses that he owns. So he said, for you to take your time out of your busy schedule to see me as a human being and to apologize to me, that is more than money. And he turned to his attorney, and his attorney advised him against it. We could get money. He says, I don't want money. It was never about money. And he said, the owner apologized to me. This is not the representative. This is not the attorney. This is the owner who founded the company, came and apologized to me. That's beyond money to me. I don't want nothing. But even with that, he dismissed the case with his attorney and he threw it out. But the owner still ended up giving him a compensation to say, I still want to do something because I'm held accountable. So when leaders hold themselves accountable for the actions of other employees within their organization and apologize into mediation, it goes a long way. That word, I'm sorry, is such a powerful tool. It could stop tanks. It could stop wars just with a simple apology. And for the second question that I'm going to look at is, I saw here, it says how to prepare oneself for ADR competition. I have been a guest judge for many mediation competition. So I would say to that question, always find somebody to role play with. Role playing and going into the courthouse and observing other mediators, contact other mediators and say, hey, can I do an observation with you? And if anybody that's on here who actually asks that question and they want to do an observation with me and see how I do it, you're more than welcome. But keep in mind, when you're doing mediation, you have to get both parties' consent that they will allow you to observe the mediation. So always look up the type of case that you want to do. So if it's like you want to do employment disputes, you want to do family disputes, construction disputes, always go and look online. YouTube have a lot of case studies on there. If you have an attorney that's on there, you could look up certain case files and just make yourself aware of the different cases that's out there and review those cases. And you'll learn the different techniques. But your opening statement sets the tone of the mediation. And also, you as a mediator got to control the mediation. I know people always say, well, the parties decide the fate of the outcome of the mediation. Well, that's really not true. The mediator sets the tone and it sets the guidelines and they set the boundaries of what the mediation is all about. And we actually give suggestions to the parties on how to settle their dispute, because we are there to help them, to assist them in resolving the dispute. And the most way you can assist them in resolving the dispute is if you come up with creative ways on how to resolve the dispute. And I'll put this one out there. Construction. Construction is one of the most complex mediation disputes that's out there because it has so much variables involved in it. Everybody's heated, but the construction people want to go back to work. So you have to come up with creative ways on, say, if it's a money dispute. When it comes to money disputes, then you could come up with creative ways and say, hey, how about you pay this one? And when you do the draw, you pull the money out from this so we could keep the construction project ongoing and there's no stoppage in the construction. Because with construction contracts, I don't know if there's any construction attorneys on here, but when you're doing construction, there's a construction clause inside that states that if you're not at the deadline, they penalize you. There's a deadline penalty clause in most construction contracts. And that penalty clause states that if you don't finish this project by this deadline, they could charge you $1,000 to $10,000 per day until you get back on track with the deadline. And that just keeps the construction developer or GC, that keeps them on schedule with getting the task done to meet this person's deadline. Otherwise, they could do 2 projects at the same time and have your project hold up. So that's why that clause is so important in construction contracts, is to have a construction deadline clause inside there, is to make sure that the construction developer or GC is not doing 2 projects at the same time and leaving yours on hanging. So again, to get ready for a competition, again, is to always observe, practice role playing. That is so effective when you're going to get ready for competition. So, and on that note, I'm gonna close off from there and pass it off to my fellow constituent, Mr. Francis.
Thank you so much, George. Thank you, Apasana, and thank you, Victor. Question number 7 that we receive, it states that, how do you authenticate the sincerity of an apology in mediation? Before I respond to that question, I would love to acknowledge the tremendous work Victor did to explaining how you can, authenticate, or how you can see that this is a genuine apology. Victor listed all the elements of an apology, which they included: 1, explanation; 2, reparation; 3, remorse. One of the things that I would love to add onto those elements relates to acknowledgement. Especially when you are apologizing on the remorse kind of apology or a regret apology, it is very important that you acknowledge what exactly is the injury that you are apologizing on. That is for regret and also for the remorse apology as well. When you are naming the injury, you have to be very specific. If it is physical injury, name it. If you are late, name it. Then what you should avoid is, 1, you cannot say, oh, sorry, if I've done this, then I'm sorry. That you are placing condition onto your acknowledgement, and you do not want to place condition onto the acknowledgement. And then the third thing that I want to add is, you should not use passive or third party's voice. I'll give you one example. You cannot say the wrong was done, or you cannot say the injury was done. It is more genuine when you put the I self into the acknowledgement. Those are the elements of an apology. Now, I want to move on to talk about the misconception of an apology. To a lot of people, when you think of apology, they look at it as being in a place of weakness. And as such, because we as human beings, we don't want to appear weak. We love to appear brave. But I challenge you that apology is actually not a sign of weakness, but rather a sign of courage. You are courageous enough to, 1, own up to the injury and 2, acknowledge that it was wrong, or 3, you are courageous enough to see the pain of another person and, express your empathy to that person. Now, when you apologize, you are lowering yourself down and you are leaving the victim with the discretion, or you are elevating the victim with the discretion of either to accept your apology or reject an apology. Now, I know that is a difficult thing for a lot of people because you don't want to appear vulnerable, or, a lot of people being in that position is very vulnerable, and as such, they tend to avoid it. But if you look at it from not what the victim is getting, but rather you look at it from what you are going to get from taking that brave step, then you will find a lot of, courage to get out of your comfort zone and apologize. What you can get out of the apology, Victor named it very well. There are tremendous advantages that you're going to get from emotion to your mental well-being, and that extends even beyond you to the community surrounding you, to the relationship that will follow. And you say, I am really sorry I did this to you. Now, the impact of that word is, it starts now and for years to come. So, one thing that I want to leave you with, don't go to apologize in hope that, or don't go to apologize because you want to be forgiven. No. Remember, when wrong has happened, the journey to forgiveness is like a grieving process. It takes time. When you apologize, don't demand forgiveness. Be steady on your apology and only hope that you will be forgiven. Those are all I have to say for now, and thank each and everyone.
Thank you very much for those wonderful contributions. Well, I will call on the speaker, Mr. Victor, to add on the last question, to make a little contribution on the last question. Well, we have some questions we'll just attend to quickly before we call it a day. Question number 7, Mr. Victor, are you with us?
I'm here with you, I'm following. Just read the question to me.
Okay. Question number 7. It says, how do you authenticate the sincerity of an apology in mediation? A quick one before we take the participants.
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for that. I think the best approach to that question will be to make a checklist of the components, the critical components of what make up for an apology. And then you use that list as a checklist. You use it as your inventory list that you can juxtapose again, against the statements that the person is making. So again, it's like drawing a diagram. Here I don't have time to do that, but we would have drawn, a line that has two columns. On one of the columns, you have the contents of what makes for a valid, legitimate apology. And on the other hand, you will have, the statement that the person has made. So what you'll be doing is, checklisting. That's the word that I've been looking for a while. You checklist against the inventory list that you have made for what counts for an apology. That's the first, I think, approach. The other approach would be, principles such as justice. Justice is very important. And I know justice is an ambiguous word. It means different things to a different category of people. So again, that would be a good threshold to use as a benchmark. So that's my response to that question. I think before we move forward, a fundamental question that I want to raise at this point would be, what's the most appropriate time for you to have an apology? And I think that question, there's no a cast in stone response to that question, because there is no appropriate time for an apology to be made. But usually I can tell you this for a fact, where an apology is a demand on the table, then therefore an apology has to be made as a preliminary condition to further negotiations. That's very important. Otherwise, apart from that, there is no appropriate time for you to make an apology. I'll give a case illustration of a mediation that I did with somebody, and initially the parties were at loggerheads. It was a virtual mediation, and the parties didn't want to be in the same virtual room. So again, that tells you the level of antagonism in the room. And I remember towards the end, once a solution had been proposed to both parties and the parties bought into the proposal of a solution, afterwards, we saw one of the parties extend an apology. And in this dispute, you had a biological daughter and a mom, pretty having an ugly conflict. And I remember, towards the end, the daughter extended an apology that I am so sorry that I put my mom and parents into this precarious position. So thank you for that.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Victor, for that. Please, if you have a question, you can quickly ask. Just raise your hand and then your virtual hand, and we'll give you the opportunity. Meanwhile, I would like to read a question here before someone.
Mr. Nanj?
Yes.
I like to
the
jump
question
in on one.
is from Patience Samuel. How do I get someone, a victim, intentionally, okay, I have intentionally offended because of his vexatious behavior, to accept my remorseful apology? The panelists, I don't know if you can hear me. Should I repeat the question?
Yes, I'll jump in on that. I'll jump in on that one.
All right. Okay.
So sometimes when you say something out of frame, and it upsets someone in mediation, if you're on Zoom, what you do on Zoom is you just go in, you say, can I talk to you privately? And you go privately and you talk to them. Never do it in public air, because you don't know what they're gonna say and you could escalate the situation. So it's always good to go privately and conversate with them and tell them, hey, I may have spoken out of turn up, or I felt I said something that offended you. It was not meant to be that way, and I'm sorry that you take it that way. Please accept my deepest apology. I may have spoken out of contents and it offended you, but it was not intentional for me to do that. And please accept my apology, and let's move forward in this mediation. And again, and you always leave with saying, again, I do apologize, I'm sorry. And you just leave it like that. And it calms them down. It doesn't work for everybody, because everybody have a different temperament, but as long as you say it and you reach out to the human side of that person, it usually calms them down.
Thank you very much, Mr. Judge, for that wonderful and insightful answer. This is let's say 4:30, and may I seek the participants' indulgence for a few minutes to enable us answer questions before we call it a day. If I have your permission, can you just maybe raise your virtual hands, and then we can just give few minutes. This is because we started a little bit late because of some of the technical hitches and some of the emergency that came up. So if I have your permission, please, so that we can just attend to some of the questions by the participants. Yeah. Okay, I can see a virtual hand. Okay. So, okay, can you just unmute? Let me know that we're together. Say yes if you give us the permission, please.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Can I hear other participants?
Just said we're together.
Yes, sir.
Okay. Yes. Okay.
I see someone will have some question.
Okay. Do I have your permission? I want to hear your voice.
Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. The second arm of the question says, if I am a kind of person that doesn't apologize and what can I do to adjust and learn to apologize to people wrong? So, Mr. Francis, I don't know if you want something on that, and then Upasana, if she is with us, can add.
Sure, thank you so very much, and thank you for that question. You know, there are two things that I want to say in relation to that question. Number one, the person has already pointed out, you know, sort of like the personality, that if I am this kind of person who does not like to apologize, what can I do? So I commend the person for having that self-awareness. It is very important. Then two, beyond self-awareness, one of the things that I would say is I challenge the person to, you know, ask himself or herself, what if the wrong was done to me? Would I want the person to apologize to me or not? I think once you start having that kind of conversation with yourself, you will be in a position to see beyond your comfort zone of not apologizing, but to look at, you know, you look at what it would be, for example, to be in the shoes of the person that you have, you know, that the wrong has happened to. And hopefully that will give you that self-drive to, you know, take action and apologize. That is the, I would say, the baseline on how you can move from not being able to apologize to extending apology. I don't know whether other discussants want to add more content to that.
Okay. We have Mr. Judge, would you want to add something on this?
I didn't get the question.
Okay. The question is, how, if I'm the kind of person that hardly apologize to persons I've wronged, how do I adjust and learn to apologize to I have wronged? Did you get me?
If I am a kind of apologize for, can I do it?
Mr. Victor, Mr. Judge, did you get the question?
Yeah, I got it. Yes. So if you're not the type of person that apologizes, you have to find a way to break that barrier of call it you have to break that barrier within yourself and say, listen, I have to, in order to resolve this dispute with this person, I have to put my best foot forward and break that cycle, break that chain, and say, listen, I know I wronged this person, and the best way to move forward is to actually say sorry to that person. So sometimes we got to get out of our own head and think, like Mr. Victor said, and it's not a way of weakness to say I'm sorry, but a way of strength to say I'm sorry. So they have to show their inner strength and say, I apologize to that person. So you always want to get out of it. Some people, they're trapped in their own head and they're so stubborn, like a donkey, they don't want to move. But sometimes we got to move in order to make the mediation and to resolve the dispute. So we have, again, and when we go into mediation, we always have to go in there in what we call good faith. Once you're there in good faith, then the resolution is easier for both parties.
Okay, thank you very much. And then question number 3 goes to you, Judge. How about enforcement of outcome? Perhaps people have come to this point where they have agreed, they've discussed, they've apologized to each other, and then they have a mediated settlement. How about the enforcement?
Okay, so when I do mediation, because I always like to tell people, the best way to resolve a mediation is right there and then. Get that contract signed right there and then. Because if you try to go 2 days later to sign that contract, somebody on that dispute might change their mind. You don't know what's going to happen when you walk out the door. So to enforce that mediation outcome, what I normally do is I normally have a summary report that I told both parties, I need to know about this dispute before we go into the mediation. So they send me out an outline of what the dispute is all about. And once I have an idea of what both parties from the mediation summary report that I send out to them to send back to me, and I review both parties, I have an outline of drafting that contract right there and then. So when I sit down with both parties, I can tweak that contract within the matter of about 30 minutes and have both parties sign it. Because once both parties sign that contract, that a mediation agreement, then now they're bound by it because that is a contract. Now, if one party violates the contract, now here in the United States, you have to take that to court and have it enforced in the court. Unless it's some type of, let's say, a business dispute. And now that business dispute, let's say that contract from the business dispute has mediation or arbitration provision in it, stating that we're going to resolve this dispute through mediation or arbitration. So once both parties have signed that, and then a dispute erupts, now that becomes enforced because of that dispute. So now you still have to get enforced in court, but at least they know that we're going to try to do this mediation process or ADR process before we take it to court. So now when it goes to court, most of the times it's not going to go to court, because once you sign that agreement with the person beforehand, and you go to the mediation process or ADR process, you're now in violation of breach of contract. So if they do so, the person that breached that contract, if they do go to court, they're going to lose anyway, because the judge is going to say, more than likely, every judge is different how to see things. The judge can say, well, this is a breach of contract. You sign the contract stating that if some type of dispute erupts out of this, that you guys is going to go to mediation. Once you go to mediation, you could prove that this person violated this provision and clause within the contract. More than likely, it's a breach of contract. So therefore, you could resolve it that way before going to court. But if not, then they could take their chance and go to court. And I always say this, and I'm sure my constituents can say, there's always that one person say, I'm just going to prove a point. I want to prove a point. And I was like, well, trying to prove that point might cost you a lot of money. So if you want to go to court, sure, go ahead. Trying to prove that point might just cost you in the end. Because sometimes I've seen where you have a dispute, and I know my constituents see this. Sometimes you have a dispute over, let's say, $1,200 US, and you might want to settle it, and the other person could settle that whole dispute with for $500. Now, because you want to prove a point, now you go to court. Now you just lost, and now that a person could turn to the judge and say, "Hey, Your Honor, I would like my attorney fees paid." So now the whole $1,200 could turn into $3,000, all because you're trying to prove a point. And now, how expensive was that point you tried to prove? So with that, to enforce the mediation outcome is, again, get both parties at the table, have your mediation settlement agreement prepped and ready, have both parties sign it right there and then. Because once you walk out the door, anything goes. Who knows? They get on the elevator and they have another argument. Now you're back at the dispute table again. So once you sit down with both of them and you have both of them sign it right there and then, it's good to go. So always have your mediation settlement agreement at the mediation table ready for both parties to sign.
Oh, okay, that's great. Thank you very much.
No problem.
So Paul, you initially so far young, if I call the name correctly. You raised your hand.
I'm sorry, actually, I do not have a question. Sorry for that.
Pardon?
Can you hear me?
Yes, you raised your hand before.
No, actually, it was a mistake. I do not have any questions.
Oh,
sorry for that.
I see. Okay, thank you very much for that. John, please, I would like your Honor, Dr. P, if she is here with us, to give us a perspective and perspective on how to enforce mediation agreement. If she is here with us, Your Honor, Dr. can you speak?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Good evening, everyone.
Good evening.
In Kaduna State Judiciary, and in conjunction with the multi-door courthouse, what we usually do is you get the parties to sign the mediated agreement, and you take it to court and file it. And the court will now adopt it as a consent judgment for purposes of enforcement. It makes it easier to enforce such agreements where parties try to, want to come out of it. Most times that's the procedure. It is taken to the court, filed, and then adopted by the court as a consent judgment, so that at a later date, where there's need for enforcement, the court can enforce such an agreement. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for that. I really appreciate. Well, I can see Stephen Lungu, if I call it correctly. Mr. Victor, I know this is yes. I don't know if Mr. Stephen can just say something on that. I don't know. Enforcement of mediation agreements. Okay, while you speak, Mr. Victor, can you say something from Kenyan perspective before you leave?
Thank you so much. I just wanted to acknowledge the fact that Stephen Lungu is a senior counsel all the way from Zambia. I just wanted to say thank you to him for being here. And I think at some point we'll hear his perspective. But the Kenyan context is this. Once an agreement has been reached or arrived at by both parties, and this has to be a mutual agreement, it is binding on the parties. And should one of the parties decide not to keep their end of the bargain, the agreement can be brought to a court of law, and the court of law can demand or forcefully make the other party comply with the dictates of the mutually agreed upon resolution. That's the Kenyan context. Thank you for asking.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much for that. I don't know if the chairman of the governing body, Rosanna Agama, will want to say something on that. Please, is there any other person who has a question that has not been answered or we want to ask? Is there anyone with any questions? Okay. I will believe that we will enjoy the day, and then we'll add it to our knowledge and perspective on.
Okay, Mr. Lancha, you want me to say something?
Yes, please, especially on any aspect briefly, and then especially enforcement, because I believe that by the time parties get to a settlement agreement, the enforcement becomes one critical and very important thing. So it would be very nice for participants to know that yes, their time engaging in the mediation session will not be a waste. So they are asking about enforcement of a mediated agreement.
Oh, okay. Enforcement of a mediated settlements agreement. Once there is an agreement between the parties, just like Mr. David has said, what operates in Kenya and what the Kaduna State Multi-Door Courthouse operates, once there is a signed document between the parties that they will be bound by this agreement, any violation becomes a breach of contract. Now, there's a difference between mediation being a binding process and a non-binding process. And sometimes people mistakenly think that, well, mediation is not binding. Mediation is binding the moment you assent your consent that you are going in for mediation. And once you violate any of the terms, then the other party has the right to take the matter to court, and it becomes a breach of contract, and it is enforceable. Why we say mediation is not binding is at the onset, when the other party withdraws, because you can actually, in negotiation, we talk about your walkaways. Where one of the parties decides to say, I'm no longer interested in mediation, you can't compel the person to mediate. But once he has signed that he's going to mediate, that is why I like the United States of America position. Before you go on with the mediation, ensure that the parties sign the mediation agreement. It's very fundamental. So once they sign the mediation agreement, it's absolutely binding and it's enforceable. So any breach or any violation of the terms is seen as a breach of contract, and it can be taken to court. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for the contribution. I want to thank the participants for participating in this settlement hour. This is just the part one. We're looking forward to discussing forgiveness itself, and you can reach out to us when you need maybe the materials, the certificates of attendance, and then prepare your mind against the next settlement hour edition. That's part two. We shall communicate the date if it is fixed. With this, I will call on Mr. Joseph George as the representative of the panelists to give us a vote of thanks, while the chairman of the governing body, Mrs. Roskana Ankama, will also give us a vote of thanks before we close.
Again, thank you guys for having me. This was definitely well-educated discussion that we have here. Actually, I learned something too, and I'm sure everybody else in here learned something. We do things a little bit different here in the United States because our laws is different. Even some states is different, but one thing is constant is the mediation process of how the mediation is done. Arbitration is also a big part of what we do here in the United States. And the arbitration process is a lot more different than the mediation, because in arbitration, you're pretty much the judge and the jury to a certain sense, that once the parties have agreed to that binding arbitration, that once you make a ruling on their case, that it's binding on both parties until somebody breaks it, then it becomes breach of contract. So the arbitration process here in the United States, it's enforceable, it's binding. But then if you have different panels like the AAA and the other arbitration panels, they have their own bylaws and guidelines that you have to follow as far as arbitration. Then we have here in the United States and pretty much everywhere else, we have what you call we bind the mediation process, sometimes with arbitration. They call it MEDOP over there. And then sometimes you enforce the negotiation into it too. So sometimes we intertwine the negotiation, but that usually happens when you're working with big companies, businesses. You'll combine the negotiation process inside there. So it's kind of what we call here in the United States, we call it hybrid mediation or hybrid arbitration, where you either include mediation into the arbitration or you include negotiation into the arbitration, vice versa. So we call it hybrid. You guys call it MEDOP and other things over there. But again, this was a great discussion with a great panelist, and it was my pleasure to be here and enjoy this and be part of this great thing with you guys. And I'm looking forward to what more you guys have in store for everybody else.
Thank you very much. Maybe before the chairman closes this meeting, can we have one of the participants say something before Mrs. Ankama closes the meeting? What I will do is to call someone. Hawa Usman, please, can you raise? Yes.
Hello, sorry, good evening.
Yeah, good evening.
Hello.
Can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. No, I'm not sure I raised up my hand. Was I supposed to? I'm sorry, I was a bit lost for a while.
Yes. Just say something on behalf of the participants and then the chairman will.
Good evening, everyone. From here. We really appreciate this webinar. It has been very educative, and I think, yes, in mediation, the most important thing is parties' ability to forgive and be able to forgo whatever it is that is their grudges, because for mediation, that is the most important thing. Once parties are unable to forgive, it becomes difficult for them to be able to forge ahead. So the ability to break the barrier of forgiveness is actually very key in every mediation process. And on behalf of the participants, I would like to thank all our resource persons. Thank you very much, and we really appreciate this. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Hawa Usman. Our chairman, can you give us your final words as we depart?
Okay, thank you very much. I want to use this medium to appreciate all our panelists, particularly George, John, and Jutta. We so much appreciate your time. You always respond anytime we call you to take up any task. We'll be calling you on and off so that we keep synergizing and between Accord and SHATI and other institutes. And I think with what we learned today, especially the concept of apology in a mediation, sometimes the parties wouldn't know how to convey an apology. So your role as a mediator is to facilitate how an apology is to be conveyed. And once an apology is appropriately conveyed, just like we have learned that there are different types of apologies, you realize that the whole matter is actually settled. So we keep learning the skills, we keep shaping the skills. Please always learn wherever there's an opportunity to learn more about ADR, not just mediation, but ADR in general, so that you can keep shaping your skills. Like I keep saying, that no one has the monopoly of knowledge. Now we have an understanding on how it operates in Kenya. I thought our Gambia brother would say something, but I think next time we engage him to teach us how it's done and in Gambia. And you remember I once said that another time we'll be looking at cross-cultural mediation, so that whenever you find yourself outside your own jurisdiction or your community, you'll be able to fit in as an international mediator. So thank you so much, participants, for taking your time. We're sorry. Let me use an apology again. We're sorry for the technical hitches from the beginning and for taking more extra 20-something minutes out of your time. We're very sorry about that. Next time we will do better. Do have a wonderful evening and thank you for participating. God bless you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Oh, I can see Mr. Aru. Would you want to say something? Your hand is up.
Yes, I am a practicing advocate of Supreme Court of India from Delhi.
Oh,
And yes, very much thankful to all of you. We have got so many things to know, so how to apologize and how to guide the participant in the mediator for apologize. And the second is that I have completed my mediation course from Accord International. Thanks for the Upasanaji. She has made a great lecture today, and all the guests and hosts are very nice today. Thanks for this session.
Thank you. You're muted.
Thank you for your contribution from India. I am very happy to hear a voice from over there. With this, we have come to the end of this meeting. Thank you once again to all the participants. Please, if you need the maybe a certificate of participation, don't hesitate to reach out to us. You can check our website on settlementhouseadr.com. and you can send a message. We can just drop our email address on the chat. You can send us a message on Settlement House 1. I will drop the email, and then maybe a phone number if you want to reach out to us. Okay, if you want to reach out to us, you can call that number. Thank you very much for staying to this time. We look forward to hosting you again in part 2 of the Settlement Hour on apology and forgiveness. And we'll still reach out to you on other aspects that we are looking at on negotiation and mediation itself. Thank you very much. Mr. Judge, thank you very much for being with us and staying to this. We really appreciate. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. My pleasure.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yes.